Thank you very much, RIM and other organizers, and inviting me here. It's such a pleasure and honor to be talking about this utmost important topic, how cities and urban planning can support our brain health and grow brain capital and brain economy. So my sincere thanks and warm welcome to everyone to discuss. We'll have fruitful, interesting discussions today. Okay, so Rim gave a wonderful introduction to the topic of brain capital and brain economy. So I'm only going to talk briefly here, but to emphasize the same point that she was bringing. It's really the human cognition that is now the new economic engine. And if you think what kind of challenges brain is facing in urban environments, our brain has evolved in evolution to quite different kind of scenery, natural sceneries, and cities are pretty recent development. So our brain has not had time to adapt yet to all the challenges that we face in urban environments. And those are things to consider when we want to plan brain positive cities. So really, the aim is to design the cities to support brain health and brain capital. So what is brain health? World Health Organization defines brain health as a state of brain functions, emotional, motor, sensory, cognitive functions that allow each of us to fulfill our potential throughout the life course. And this is really about thriving. It's not about lack of disorders or diseases, but it's about the ability to fulfill one's potential. And this similar definition is also as part of mental health definition. And of course, these mental health and brain health are really intricately intertwined, and they can't really be separated. But in mental health definition, there's the fact that, again, one can realize one's potential, but also cope with normal stressors of life, can work productively and fruitfully, and is able to make a contribution to his or her community. So fulfilling this potential really depends on our cognitive abilities, our social abilities, emotional abilities. And we need to provide the best possible surroundings for them to flourish. Again, I follow on Rim's footsteps. She was speaking about brain capital deterioration or elevation, and it is really the case that the environments we are in can either improve brain health or can compromise it. So I'm not going to go through all of these different things, and these are only a small number of the totality of all those different things that impact our brain health in urban environments. But some of the things that I want to raise here is the light and noise pollution. Also this aim towards kind of 24/7 activities that everything can be done at every time of the day. While human brain needs the circadian rhythm, our body functions in a circadian rhythm, and really if you don't respect it, that has detrimental effects on health in general, and especially in brain health. Then we need to think about access to green spaces, blue spaces, and also in design, we need to think of designs that are pleasant and easy to understand. And that's another like real honor to be here in this beautiful, beautiful historic setting where this is such a pleasure for my brain, and I'm sure for all of you yours also. So there's a lot to learn from these old buildings, what kind of forms are pleasing to the eye and less stressful to the eye than maybe some of the modern settings. And we need, there's a lot of causes of stress in urban settings, and we need to be able to balance stress and recovery and have spaces, public spaces for rest and recovery to recover from strain and overstimulation. And well, yesterday I was walking in the very hot city, but there were these beautiful long trees that were really providing a shade, a total shade, and it was quite pleasant, even though otherwise the weather was hot, and really demonstrated to me how well it's been planned here in some places to give that shade and that helps people to be in a comfortable temperature and also recover and have that green access. So anyways, these factors that either erode or enhance have an outcome on brain health. There can be stress, confusion, overload, fatigue, brain fog, poor sleep, or what we aim at in brain positive cities is recovery, clarity, focus, innovation, connection, and refreshing sleep. Okay, we have, okay. So brain health, like I said, it's not just like lack of disorders or reducing risk of disorders, but it's really the like optimizing well-being and cognitive function, the abilities to fulfill one's potential here and now, not just trying to reduce risk of a disorder in the future. But let's talk about risk of brain disorders here for a minute. So Lancet Commission has listed 14 modifiable risk factors for memory disorders. So these 14 modifiable risk factors account for 45% reduction in memory disorders. So we really have things to do to reduce memory disorders. We have an aging population and memory disorders are quite common, and there's a lot to be done to reduce this risk, and some of them have to do with urban environments. And I listed here those that I think are especially important when we think about brain positive cities and how we need to plan them. So social isolation is a big risk factor for memory disorders, especially in the older age. We need to create spaces where people can naturally connect and form meaningful connections. Air pollution, Rim was mentioning also, and that's a new modifiable risk factor in the Lancet Commission paper. And hearing impairment is actually a really big modifiable risk factor. It accounts for 7%. And that's something we need to take into account in planning cities. We need to take care that there's not too much noise pollution and shield people's hearing from loud noises. And then, of course, brain injury in itself is a big detrimental impact on brain capital and brain health, but also it has an impact on a risk of memory disorders. So we need safe mobility, good planning for pedestrians, and in general, we need to pay attention to safety issues. But let's move from memory disorders and brain disorders into how can we really improve the productivity, brain health, and this brain capital, brain economy. At the core of brain economy, I think, are the executive functions. And executive functions are these higher cognitive control functions that rely on the intricate frontal networks that have evolved late in the evolution. So basically, in humans, we have quite big and quite complicated frontal lobes that really account for that human potential that we have, where we still are far superior to, for example, AI. The frontal lobes develop late also in individual development, and they take care of control of our emotions, attention, thinking, and they help us achieve our goals. So anytime we are engaged in goal-directed behaviors, we need executive functions. When we engage in difficult tasks, novel tasks, innovative tasks, we need executive functions. But executive functions are very vulnerable to different things. They're vulnerable to brain disorders, brain damage, but not only those, also to chronic stress, burnout, poor sleep, and a lot of different factors can compromise executive functions. And even a day-long work that involves intense cognitive challenges is compromising our executive functions. So basically, it means that cognitive tasks that are very engaging and that are not balanced enough with restoration and recovery tax our executive functions. And there was a very nice study by Wheeler et al. In Current Biology 2022 that showed that after 5 hours of cognitively demanding task, the brains accumulated glutamate, and people were making less optimal economic decisions. I have been starting with my group occupational burnout, and that's a big kind of eroding factor for brain capital, really like a global pandemic, one could say. And occupational burnout is not just a psychological thing. It has many impacts on brain, and it impairs executive functions. People find it harder to plan things, to organize things, to memorize things, to regulate emotions. And it's not just a subjective experience, but also their brain networks work differently, less efficiently, and they need to allocate more resources to accomplish the same task as healthy brains. So executive functions are something we need to protect if we want to protect the human potential. Another thing we need to consider about the brain functions when we plan brain positive cities are the brain's capability and tendency to very effectively detect threatful stimuli. So brain is really this superior threat detection device, and one can detect threat very fast and very automatically. The quick pathway from thalamus to amygdala provides the possibility that our brain and our body can very quickly react to potential threat so that we are ready to either run away or fight. So this fight or flight reaction starts from the threat. But many times it's a false alarm. There can be something that is really not a threat, and the body is already in a threat state. And there is where we need our executive functions to calm down the system. And this is, of course, a cost. Because the threat is so biologically important, it's important for our survival. We allocate our attention, we allocate our executive functions, our other cognitive resources to threat detection and minimizing the threat so that we are not as good in the current task, what we are doing. And if you think of urban environments, there are many things that brain can initially think are threatful. So we really need to design urban environments so that the brain is not unnecessarily threatened. So if you think of overall the neuroscience of urban experience, of course, there are a lot of different factors, and I don't have time to go through all of them. But one is this chronic stress from sensory overload, from maybe threatening stimuli, but then also it's not just the threat that captures attention. Any salient stimuli captures attention. So salient stimuli mean that they are colorful, they are moving, they are emotionally important. And billboards, flashing lights, the city is full of these salient stimuli that capture our attention. And we have basically like two attention systems in the brain. The other one is this top-down, bottom-up system that automatically gives attention and attentional resource to salient or threat-related stimuli. And then we have the top-down attentional system, which is more dependent on the frontal lobes, and it's involved in our current tasks and goals. So basically, we are able to pay attention to things that are important to us or our task. And these two systems need to be in a balance. It's important that we quickly detect a true threat and we are able to, for example, if there's suddenly a fire alarm, we stop paying attention to this lecture and react to that stimuli. But then if it's a false alarm, we are quickly able to move the attention back to the slides and the talk. So basically, this is what we need. But anytime our attention is distracted to something else, it's effortful to bring it back. So it's important that we are not constantly distracted by different stimuli. So we need to take care there's no sensory overload. We need to avoid cumulative strain, and we need room to recover. So we need to design the cities according to brain ergonomics. When you are sitting down there in the chairs, you understand that it's important that the chair is ergonomic so that your back doesn't start aching. And we understand the physical ergonomics, and its meaning, but we need to also understand that in quite similar way, most of us are working with our brains, and when we are navigating in our environment, that all happens with our brain functions. So we need to design workplaces and living places and an urban environment according to the constraints and features of our brain functions. We need to support easy and pleasant perception. We need to protect the attention from distractors, and really need to take into account the limitations of human cognition and human perception, and basically not only burden it, but actually really help it, support it, so that we can save our limited resources to the most important tasks, to the task of being innovative, to accomplish our potential or whatever task we are at. So brain ergonomic environments and activities support focus, creativity, and emotional regulation. So now back to the aesthetics. Like I said earlier, we are in such a beautiful place that I can just feel how it's soothing my brain. And we need beauty, we need visual scenery that is both easy and pleasant to process. There was a study by Lee et al. And they were showing how urban stimuli that was with statistical properties were very different from natural scenes. Those were stimuli that visual cortex had harder time processing, so there was more metabolic activity, suggesting that visual cortex is processing these unnatural scenes less efficiently, and it's taxing the brain, and it may have untoward consequences on brain health. So natural forms seem to be easier for brain to process. And then also there's a whole big literature on the importance of nature to brain health and especially to mental health. And that's another thing that we need those access to nature, or access to green and blue spaces. Let's go then to light pollution. So light pollution is an important but neglected area. Our brain and whole body works in a circadian rhythm, meaning that we have different functions during the light time, daytime, and different functions during the nighttime. And sleep is meant to be during the dark hours, and our melatonin production, melatonin that supports sleep, is compromised if we are in light surroundings when we are supposed to sleep or just before sleep. So light pollution disrupts melatonin production. It has untoward consequences on sleep, and sleep has so many different functions for both cognition, memory consolidation. It protects also executive functions. It helps with emotion regulation. And there are important functions also in maintaining brain health by lymphatic flow that cleans the brain from misfolded proteins that accumulate in memory disorders. So sleep is critical. We need to protect sleep, and we need to pay attention to light pollution. And designing brain positive cities means that they need to be designed in a circadian way. So both lighting, indoor lighting and outdoor lighting need to follow the circadian rhythm, so that we have bright light access and access to natural light during the daytime and in the morning time. And in the evening, we have more dimmer lights, and at night time as dark as possible. Of course, in urban environments, we need lights for safety. And of course, we also have people who work at nighttime. We have shift work. So this needs to be balanced with those needs. But whenever we can, we should pay attention to lighting and sounds and other sensory stimuli and activities, so that they support our internal rhythm. Okay, so we are talking about brain positive cities and how to build them, how to plan them. I raised here 5 pillars for brain positive cities that support cognitive, emotional, and social well-being. Connecting with other people, meaningful social connections protect from memory disorders, and they help us thrive otherwise too. So opportunities for social ties and belonging are one part of brain positive cities. Calm, we need to balance sensory overload, reduce stress, and have those bases for recovery. I already mentioned the rhythm, but it's good to emphasize it again. So activities and lighting and other stimuli follow circadian rhythm. Grow, urban environments should have possibilities for lifelong learning and creativity. And finally, inspiration. Brain positive cities inspire, they nurture beauty, culture, values, and meaning. And all of this fosters the human potential that is at the core of the brain capital and brain economy. So Barcelona is the UNESCO capital of architecture. And like I mentioned here, a lot of things that already are brain positive. For example, these green corridors and walkability, and there's some neuroscience informed urban design in Barcelona, and all these beautiful historic old buildings. Then Oulu is a city in northern Finland, which was chosen as the European Capital of Culture. And their vision is to connect people with both technology and art and culture, and also consider the nature and aim for ecological and social sustainability. So the concept is a cultural climate change. Like Rim said in the beginning, cities are really the ecosystems for brain health. Applying brain ergonomics in future urban design builds resilience and innovations for generations to come. Parks, quiet light, connection, and beauty should be seen as essential public cognitive infrastructure. Cognitive infrastructure that needs investment and appreciation and thought. This will all support human flourishing. When we design environments so that every citizen can realize their full potential, we build brain capital and human flourishing. Sustainable cities, both brain health and climate resilience advance hand in hand. And in the end, I want to say that cities that help people think, feel, and live better, those are the brain positive cities. Thank you so much.